Welcome to the NC Spin After Spin. Additional comments from our panelists just available on our website. I want to ask you, what do you wish you had said on last week's show, but you didn't? Chris?
Well, we talked about the controversies in the mental health system, the problems at the hospital, the problems with Cardinal Innovations Healthcare and the CEO getting all that money. But if you talk to mental health advocates and people who have their family members who have mental illness, their complaint has been the same as it's been for 10 years, which is there's not enough services in the community, not at the hospitals. And the whole point of mental health reform started way back in 2001 in response to a court decision was we keep people in the least restrictive environment possible, which meant we take people out of the hospitals, we put them in the communities. The second half of that equation is the General Assembly has to provide the resources in the communities to take care of them. Well, we did the first part. We got them out of the institutions, and I think most mental health advocates will still tell you there are tons of people in North Carolina that can't get the services they need in their communities. They live a long way from a hospital. They shouldn't be hospitalized, many of them. So the big debate ought to be how we continue to figure out a way to provide those community services while we address the problems at the hospital.
And you're spot on about that. Brad Kroon, what do you wish you'd have said on last week's show?
Well, very similar to what Chris said on the mental health issue. We were talking about just the actual frustration of, how do you have so many empty beds at a brand new psychiatric hospital and the oversight that's involved? And there's a breakdown at the legislative level, there's a breakdown at the executive level in the Department of Health and Human Services, and there's a breakdown at the facility level. And you've got to hold people accountable at all three levels. I think Mandy Cohen and Mark Benton will be able to get their hands around it. They're capable leaders. I think they'll be able to do it. I think you'll see the senior legislative leadership, like Nelson Dollar, the Speaker. I'm not that confident of Mr. Heiss, but I think Nelson could get in there and actually hold some people accountable on getting things done.
This is really the first big test for Secretary Cohen.
Absolutely, it is.
Becky, Greg, what do you wish you'd have said on last week's show?
Well, just to follow up on the conversation about the mental health services, Cardinal Innovation Healthcare, I think it's important to note in that audit, and there certainly were some problems. I mean, I think Beth Woods did a really good job with that audit. It was 21 pages, the report that she submitted, and there were complaints about administrative things, about the salaries, as we talked about, but I think it's important to note that there were no complaints in the actual administration of the services. There was no malfeasance, there were no fraud, there was nothing like that. It was, more just questions of did they spend the money appropriately for the salaries and those kind of things. And it's a small percentage of what they do. They provide services for, I think, 800,000 North Carolinians. They're the largest provider of mental health services. They're doing a good job. This other stuff needs to be cleared up, but I think that we're moving in the right direction. I agree with Brad and Chris that it's a serious problem. It needs to be addressed. It needs aggressive attention to it, but I think that we're moving in the right direction in these MCO managed care facilities. I think are doing a good job.
John Hood, what do you wish you'd have said on last week's show?
When we were talking about the Supreme Court decision on redistricting of congressional maps, I made a reference to the Goldilocks theory or the Goldilocks standard, and I just want to explain very quickly what I meant by that. The Republicans, when they went and did their legislative and congressional maps in 2011, they were in part applying previous Supreme Court precedent, including North Carolina cases, along the lines that if you're going to draw VRA, Voting Rights Act districts, you ought to aim for basically a 50% plus a little bit as your standard. Now, there were some states around the South that went much further than that and packed black voters into these districts, 60, 70%, which is clearly egregious. But the Republicans in North Carolina thought they were complying with appropriate standard. If you're going to have a race-conscious set of districts, it has to be a standard, let's make it 50%. This is what the court ultimately didn't buy. And because they're not saying with Clarence Thomas, race should have no role in drawing maps, what they're saying is race can play some role. We're not going to tell you how much. You're just going to have to go do it and bring it back to us. This is an invitation to constant litigation and basically endless oversight by federal judges.
We'll know it when we see it.
And I'm not arguing that I know the alternative. I just think this is an untenable position to be in.
Well, thanks for watching the After Spin. We'll have more video all during the week on ncspin.com.